you want to bounce characters off of each
Yeah,
other, right? And you don't
yeah.
want like, and I mean, I usually use personality types. You know, funny enough, my academic background is in screenwriting.
Oh,
That's what I studied in school, like creative writing. And, you know, you can really use a lot of personality types as you're typing fictional characters and also use it when you're writing them, right? Because you're like, okay, I got to make sure these people are different. And like, because this person's this personality, because this person's this personality, it's cool because I know that they're probably going to like conflict on this specific consistent thing, you know, and they'll get along on this specific consistent thing.
how do you go about assessing the personality type of your students?
You know, there's a little. I mean, I mentioned in the book. There's some tricks. Like, you know,
Mm.
sometimes I'll have them take the test. I usually do, but I don't always go with what the test says, right? Because once, I mean, I did create the test, but once again, it's cookie cutter. It doesn't always match up, and I also don't know how the kids are gonna answer, right? So at the end of the day, I kind of just try to figure out what their core value is, and if they're you know, most kids there are like all people, the majority of people are going to have their core value be safety and security. So one of the tricks I use actually is when I'm working with a kid, I'll make jokes at my mom's expense. Like I'll make fun of my mom, right? Like, oh yeah, my mom, blah blah blah. You know, I don't know. I'll make fun of her for being slow, or I'll tell them stories about my dad used to make fun of her, and I see the kid's reaction. And generally, if the kid's reaction is like horror or just like terrified or scared for me or almost offended that I would insult my mom in that way, they're probably a gatherer. Because gatherers have like a sense of like order, and which is sweet, right? Like they're like, oh, you shouldn't be making fun of your mom. You should be making fun of your family. Like that's you're making fun of authority, right? And so they're either going to be scared that I'm doing that or like offended. And that's generally how I tell they're a gatherer. Now, if they don't react that way, then it usually pushes them on the other, like one of the other three packs. And usually, well, hunters will usually just laugh because they think it's hilarious and they love a little mischief. So generally, that points them to in that direction. But that's just one of the ways, one of the tricks you can use, right? I don't
Ooh.
like to ask. I don't like to ask specific questions because generally, when you ask specific questions, people get defensive, right? So it's better to say certain things and watch how people react. Excuse me, and then that's the best way to figure out what someone really is.
Wow. So you probe them through funny jokes or like informal communication, nothing too direct. Yeah.
I mean, especially with adults, right? With adults, we're the worst adults, right? Because we're so defensive and we like put up these barriers. We might not even know who we are. I've had adults take the test and or tell me like they're this animal type. I'm like, no, you're not that animal type, and they'll pick the exact opposite. And I'm like, come on, no. I mean, I even if at least you should be a little close, right? But they're so opposite of what the animal that they chose because I think we often deceive ourselves, right? Or we want to be something that we're not. And that's the whole point of the book was to help people appreciate who they are and truly value themselves for who they are versus trying to be something based on what another person values.
Yeah, I mean, like you mentioned before, everyone wants to or feel like the main character, right? And they want to prove that any way they can by picking their own animal type. Yeah.
Everybody wants to be Harry Potter, right?
Does it ever happen that the personality types overlap? So, for example, let's say, did you ever happen to have a kid that you are not sure which personality type they have because they have so many of traits of different ones? Is that a thing?
You know, I always base it on values versus what people do on the
Ah,
outside, right? So it's not like if someone you can confuse certain personality types from the outside because they might seem similar, but then if you ask them why they did that, they might have done that for a totally different reason. Like I'm always saying, like you know, using myself and